Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to the Connection Beyond Communication webinar. Wherever you're at in the world, if you could type in a hello from wherever you're at, preferably in your local language, preferably a local greeting so that we know where you're at. Good to see some different language greetings coming in. We'll be starting with the webinar in just 1 minute. If you can make sure you've got pen and paper ready so that you're ready to take notes, we'll be covering off a whole lot of ground on today's webinar. By the way, we did ask for some questions before the webinars from attendees who registered. If you didn't get a chance to come up with your question before the webinar, please feel free to type it in at any point in time to the chat room and we'll take a look at it. And we'll reserve time at the end of the webinar today for questions. So we are getting some just straight hellos because that's obviously the local for different people around the world. Hola, good to see. Well, I'm from Australia originally, so g'day from me. Even though I'm here in Las Vegas, my home now, g'day is a good starting point. So let's welcome to our Engage and Grow webinar, and today, connection beyond communication. What does that mean? Well, when we think about communication, and I go back to, for many years, having taught the theory of true communication is the response you get, meaning the response you get is how well your communication was received by the other person. What we're going to look at today is taking that a step further and saying, okay, what does the communication that we're using do to help us connect with others? How do we connect in with others? So for instance, starting out today with you typing in what your communication or the way you communicate a hello or a welcome is a great starting point to that. Now, if you wouldn't mind typing in what city you're in as well, that'd be fantastic. What town, city, or country, whichever way you want to put that in, so that we can start to actually build a collaboration between all of us and get our communication moving from just straight communication to connection. So we're going to look at multiple different strategies for that today, how you can take your communication, because ultimately here at Engage and Grow, we're all about creating business growth and team growth and human growth, the growth of the organization by the growth of the people. So engaging people in growth. Now, if we're going to get engagement, then obviously our communication needs to keep scaling up or growing further. I mean, the more and better we communicate, the better our engagement, the better our engagement, the better our growth and performance. So when we think about connectivity, not just communication, and how does communication bring about connectivity is a great way to take a look at that. So let's dive into today's webinar. Let's dive into what we're here to learn about today and make sure we get some exciting lessons that we can apply to our work environment in the next 24 hours so we can start to see some of the differences to what this actually makes. So when we think about communication and we go to that highest level of communication and great communication, where not only is there the thought is happening, the meaning is happening, but the essence of the communication is high. There is that level of connectivity. And that's where, you know, to open today with Oprah's quote about connection being the starting point of all great communication, I think is really, really important for us to understand. So why is that important? Well, let's think about this. Communication is, and again, as a society, our levels of communication has gradually gotten better and better and better. We've required more and more of ourselves and our team and our partners, our management, our leadership, better and better and more communication. And that's where what we're starting to look at here is, are you actually connecting or are you just communicating? You know, if I was running an event in or even in the early 2000s, it would have been on effective communication. And I think today what we're seeing is that the growth of productivity or the growth of engagement and that the level of disengagement, we're seeing that connective communication is starting to reduce those levels of disengagement and actually bring about levels of full-on engagement in the organization. So that real task-oriented communication strategy that is more you know, less heart-based, more head-based strategy of communication. And I think Many of us went to the training courses on communication, and we learned things like communication profiling, NLP. We learned body language styling, and all of these things that lead us to be better communicators. Well, today is not just about being a better communicator, it's about being a better connector. Okay, how do you connect? And that's where the human emotion side of where we're at, communicating the emotion, connecting the emotion. I remember sitting with my wife one time, and back in her supermodel days when she was on TV doing that stuff, and there was a TV show she would always have me watching, and it was Tara Banks, I think was her name, and she would talk to them about smiling with their eyes, and she'd call it smizing. And I was like, how do you smize? And I'm sitting there for a while thinking, I don't really get this. I don't understand it. But what the explanation that my wife was saying, you know, when you can communicate emotion just with the eyes, you don't actually have to change the mouth. You don't have to do that. And so really, when we start to understand how well we can connect with our communication, where empathy and compassion are part of that communication narrative that comes from, yes, the words we use, the tonality we use, the body language we use, the way we approach the people that we're in. You know, great communication often starts with just a presupposition that we're on the same level, the presupposition. And I know when I experience, I won't say bad communication, but when I experience communication that doesn't connect, I find that what happens is that I'm stuck in a position where that person seems to think they're smarter than me. Or if I'm disconnecting, it's because I'm teaching or presenting from a position of saying, you know, obviously I'm smarter than you, therefore I am better than you, therefore there's a disconnect. The presupposition of connective communication is equality. And you can go back several webinars here where we talked about the equality process and how that actually works in an organization to create that engagement through equality. So I think it's important to understand that connectivity comes from a level of sameness, a level of equality, and that's a really important part of understanding it. And I guess the other thing is, if I'm seeing great communication, and as a coach in business and as a facilitator of how we bring about engagement in an organization, one of the fundamentals that I look for is, I know that I'm doing a good job at communication when the person is saying, you're right, Brad, I should do that. Or, yep, that's the way, Brad, I think we should go down that path. But I know I'm doing a great job at connectivity when the person is sitting there thinking, I know what to do. I know which way to go. I know how to do this. When it's coming from the person that I am connecting with, I've scaled up my communication skills. I've scaled up to a point where I'm bringing out of them their greatness rather than giving them some of my perceived greatness. And that's that equality thing, I think, again, mixing into it. So think about a time when you were in a scenario where the person communicating with you had put themselves on a level different to yours. And let's think about one where they've said, you know, they've sort of put themselves on a level where they're smarter than you, if that makes sense. Think about that communication and what happened. How fast did you, and I want you to type in your answer, how fast did you disconnect when that person put themselves out there as better or smarter than you and knowing more and being, you know, all of those things? How fast was your disconnect? Okay, and I'll be intrigued to see how many minutes you gave them, if any of you did even give them minutes in your thing. So come on, let me see what yours is, Berkshire. What is your number? How many minutes or how long did you give them? I know for me, and I won't give you my answer until I get yours, because I think it's important to not sway your thinking in that manner. My feeling when I'm in that scenario, in that disconnected scenario, and I'm not sure about you, but I know I shut down, and I'm not even really, you hear of the term active listening. It's even more than that. Connective listening is different to active listening. Only a few minutes, 5 minutes. Jose, you're a very generous person, giving them 5 minutes before you disconnect. In my feeling, I know that I might still be there, and I guess I'm still technically listening. And I guess I'm an auditory listener, so I could probably repeat back every word they've said, but I'm definitely not connected. Now, if you want to understand connected communication, I'll give you the simplest example I can give you. I'm at home, I'm watching a sporting event. My wife comes to chat with me. She says to me, hang on, you're not even listening to me. I can repeat back to her every single word she said, but I wasn't connected in any way, shape, or form. I had not disconnected from the television where I'm watching the sport to connect with this person. And you see that a lot of times in different scenarios. And I know, and we'll get to more of how to do this in a little moment. But I know when I'm in a business scenario, and if let's imagine as a speaker, I've just come off stage, there's a group of people who want to meet with me, and I know that I have to stay very connected with that person that I'm with, not moving my eyes or my gaze or myself to the next person until I've actually finished this connection. Otherwise, that person will not feel a great experience in communicating or connecting with me. So keep those examples in mind as we go through our event today and as we learn more and more about this. So when the team at Human Matters actually did this study of connecting communication, and they broke it down into the 4 different stages, and I think it's important for us to sort of understand this at a different level. The observation, you know, when we start with observation, we start with what we see, and that's often framed by our perspective of the world as well. Obviously, we try and do no judgments and that sort of thing, but the human brain and the human is technically a judging machine. You know, we're scaling, comparing, you know, contrasting. That's how we sort of evaluate and work out what's safe, what's not, etc. So when we're in a scenario where we're observing what's going on, to then move to the connecting communication, one of the first things that the team actually suggested from Human Matters is that we move straight to feeling. Now, not into judgmental or negative feeling in that way, but the I feeling type thing. And if you're starting to think of, you've seen stuff around this before in more marriage-oriented or family-oriented communication, definitely has been the case. I mean, the highest level of training on communication has been through relationship trainers, because they've tried to teach and communicate and educate around the subject of communication at the very highest level. The most intimate level of communication is between between partners, and thus that level of communication is starting to pervade into the world now of business and community and groups and communication. So that feelings, and we'll get more into the feelings side of it in just a moment. And what we're trying to do here is connect the emotion and the need. Okay, so if you think of, or if we just go back to the Simon Sinek's whole book of Start With Why, the why is where the emotion comes from. Too many opportunities are missed because we don't connect with the why, the vision, the deep-hearted thing. And, you know, I see people out there in the world who still don't understand their why. And it's like, you know, once you grasp that, and that's why I do love teaching about that stuff, but the need is sort of that concrete solution that we're looking for. And the need is really about what we have to focus on, but connecting that emotion with the need and then moving it through to the request of what needs to be done is that process of getting connective communication. And so if you think of the observation and the request are sort of the outliers, but the central theme to this is where we sit down and say, the emotions connecting with the needs is a very important part. Now, as we know historically, emotions have not been a massive part of communication in a work environment. It's becoming more and more so. Our Compassionate Leadership webinar, we started to examine how we can do more and more of that. And so as you as a communicator want to scale up your communication and get to connectivity rather than just communication, it starts to really breed that necessity for communicating about your emotions. How do emotions impact you, and what emotions are going to be needed for this communication to happen? So thanks to the team at Human Matters, what we then look at is the emotions and how do people communicate those emotions and what happens from that. So from starting on the low energy side of it, where the communication might be something along the line, well, I don't care, I feel disconnected type thing. And having that scenario, when someone feeds back to you their emotion and you ask for that emotion, so it's not just about your emotions going out when you're communicating and connecting, it's about their emotions coming back. Or when they say things like, I'm worried, I'm concerned, if they're, I'm doubtful, or I have a fear about, that afraid communication, again, these feelings are allowing us to connect so that we can move past that. If we didn't get to the feeling, then our communication doesn't have a level of connectivity, and therefore, even though logically it makes sense, that lack of connectivity will actually lead to not much happening. Low level engagement, low level productivity. The higher the engagement, the higher we understand the emotion linking to the need, we can increase productivity or increase engagement, which increases productivity, which increases growth. So it's really getting down to that effective communication that really breeds that connectivity. The sadness one, when people say, I'm sorry, they express about pain, maybe, regret. These emotions, again, we've got to bring them out if we're going to move past them. The frustration side of it, irritation or annoying, it's difficult. These are some of the words you're going to get coming out of people, or some of the things. Even if they get to nervous or furious type thing, there can be a frustration. But then as we move to some of the more positive words, the energetic words, motivated, inspired, I feel confident around this. Even if they say something like, I feel engaged, I feel like this, I'm connected to this thing, using that languaging moves us in that positive direction. And again, connecting emotion with the need moves people into this connected communication status. The happy one, they're satisfied, I'm pleased with, it appeals to me, I'm glad about that. Even just stating clearly, this makes me very happy. That style of emotional connection. And it's pretty hard to have connection without feelings and emotions. It really is. And so as a business leader, one of the things we're aiming to do with that level of connectivity, or that level of compassion and empathy, is really breed to a point where connection between humans, not just between you and your team, but between each of them. And that's why it's important to, when we come into an organization as Engage and Grow, when we come into your team and work with your team and start looking at how do we actually build this level of engagement, it's important that we actually break through to emotion and to a comfort level of emotion. Now, when we say emotion, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's crying in the corner type thing, although, that may happen. I doubt it, but it may happen. But what it could mean is that the emotion of frustration comes out, the emotion of a low energy, or that if those emotions come out, then at least now we're bringing them into connectivity. It doesn't matter whether we connect with a positive or a negative emotion, as long as we start the connection somewhere to breed that level of of connectivity, and therefore engagement, and therefore productivity, and therefore growth. So one of the things that the Coda partners did with their elements of the connected leadership framework, and all of this starts with intention. So we start with intention and say, okay, where do we move from with our intention? And it's a really important question to ask for each of us, and say, okay, intention, or in an organizational thing, that might be the purpose or the direction or the goals or that style of communication around it, aspirations, directions, milestones. So once we know that intention, and I guess it's a fairly interactive model. In fact, the Coda team really do stress the level of interactivity between these different elements. Well, that identity is that central hub, okay? By having that central identity of where the organization, so the beliefs, the values, the self-views. Now, that's both organization and team and individual. So an individual with their values, beliefs, and their self-identity or self-views, that identity is what the other things flow through. That self-belief, that way of looking at the world, is what these others flow through. And so the intention coming through from that. Now, if let's just pick examination as an example. Looking within, not just examination of without, but examination looking within. Consider the context and considering others type thing. So really empathic examination, not just external examination. It's easy for us as a leader to examine what is happening, who's happening, what's being done. It's harder for us to remind ourselves to be in a position of connective leadership, and thus actually asking questions internally and asking emotive style questions, empathetic and compassionate style questions around that. Exploration, again, so if examination's on the inside, exploration is where we look to the outside and start thinking about, well, how does that fit with what we're doing? So the gathering of information and evaluating options. Again, our identity will see it in a different way. Different people see things. Enlistment. So if we think about this as an overall picture, before I get into the details of enlistment and execution, the overall picture says that if we set an intention, these other aspects are what help breed connectivity amongst us. So it's important for us to think of that connected framework exactly as the Coda team put it forward to us. So enlistment, when we think of the vision, okay, we're enlisting people in that vision, enrolling, enlisting, getting that buy-in. And the buy-in is a very big part of the engage and grow process. How we actually get people from a position of either low engagement or no engagement or even disengagement, that buy-in process is really important. And so that identity and that values and that vision of where we're going is an important aspect of it. So the identity and the vision, meaning the identity and the intention, are a big part of how you actually take these four other points and bring them all together. Execution, obviously, the planning, the getting things done, and making sure that it all comes together, and really just removing of barriers. I've always taught my management and leadership teams that it's really important as a leader that one of the biggest jobs you have is the removal of excuses, is the removal of barriers. Remove excuses so that once the excuses are all gone, then the person has to confront that it's up to them. They are now responsible and accountable for making that happen, sort of thing. So as a connecting leader, we have to be thinking first and foremost about where we're going, who we are to get there, what's our identity. So who we are and what we're doing and why we're doing it, that breeds these other things together. And It's very hard to form a connected organization or to create connected leadership or connected communication when we don't know where we're going and we don't know who we are. What are our values and our core values that we stand by as an organization? I think that really is one of the big parts of building a connected organization. Is it's far easier to connect when we're going somewhere. It's far easier to connect when we're moving in a certain direction on a certain path together with an agreed set of values or an agreed set of a way of thinking, that identity of self. The other things can happen once we're there. It's hard to have enlistment without a direction. It's hard to have examination when we don't already know what values we're examining to. It's hard to have exploration if we don't know where we're going. It's hard to have execution if we don't know where we're going and who we are and what we stand for. So to be connected, we need that. So if you want to work on that, please connect with your Engage and Grow team member and make sure that you're working towards that direction rather than just in any direction. Now, what happens when communication moves to connection is we start to see the levels of collaboration increase. A connected team have far more collaboration. Okay, so if we take a look at this quadrants here, and again, thanks to John and the team at Thin Difference. If we go right back to it, connecting communication inspires to act mindfully, with compassion, with the level of emotion, but it really takes us to where we communicate with a level of emotional intelligence, high emotional intelligence, far better connectivity, okay? Now, when we take a look at collaboration, it's saying, okay, well, what happens when we move to this level of connectivity? Where do we actually get to and what is the benefit of it? Well, the benefit is the high levels of collaboration, and high levels of collaboration lead to speed of growth, higher productivity, higher all of these things. So down in the bottom corner here where we see low, okay? So low connection and low collaboration. Now, what happens in that place, it's like the solo race, okay? So people in that space where there's low connectivity between the people in the organization and low level of collaboration, so the low number of connections, the person might be new, they might be in a virtual scenario, so there's low levels of connections. And I will always, and I'll keep coming back to this, the word that I learned from Tony Hsieh of Zappos fame. Tony used the word collisions, and I think that when you want to see collaboration, you need more collisions, okay? And what he termed collisions was just people bumping into each other at the water cooler or running into each other at the coffee shop or walking down the hall and asking a question type thing. Those basic little levels of collisions are signs of massive collaboration. Now, when there is a low level of connectivity, in other words, people don't even know each other, you will breed a low level of collision, therefore you'll breed a low level of collaboration. So when we see that scenario, that solo voyage, I guess, you have to have a high level of self-trust in that scenario. It's not about trust of the team or others. It's you trust in yourself to get the job done. Now, there are some people who don't want collaboration and don't want connectivity. They just trust themselves and therefore they work it and they do it all themselves, okay? So low level of communication, low level of collaboration, connectivity, and therefore low level of collaboration. Now, if we move over to the mutually independent there on the top side, where we say now what we have is we still have a low level of collaboration, but we have a high level of connectivity. Otherwise, there's a lot of people in the organization, they know each other, they work together for quite some time, but this is more like a relay race than a solo race. I'll do my part, I'll run along, I'll hand you the baton, you then run and do the next part, and then you'll hand it to someone else who will run and do the next part type thing. It's where, yes, we have connectivity, but low level collaboration, okay? So the pieces have to be done separately, one after the other, that style of thinking. Now, where trust fits into that one is that's where you have to have a lot of trust in your teammates. You have to have a lot of trust in others to make that become a reality. Now, if we take go to the opposite quadrant down there where we say partner, okay, when we partner, this is where we have high collaboration, but in the partner level, we've got a low level of connectivity. So it might be 3 or 4 people in a team that work very well together. There's a small amount of people. Think of it kind of like the rowing boats, where they race in the rowing boats. You know, there's 3 or 4 people working very well together in collaboration, making things happen, but it's not the whole team. It's not the big organization. It's and in this particular case, you've got to have a lot of trust in your partner. If they're the person rowing with you, you've got to have a lot of trust that they balance out that boat sort of thing and keep it moving in the right direction. Ultimately, when we look to collaboratively being engaged, okay, so high level of connection leading to high level of collaboration. So you've got high connectivity. In other words, the people know each other in the organization. And if I keep stressing that, it's not by accident, because the more people know each other, whether it be because they've worked together a long while or whether it because they're socially interacting, whatever it is, the more they know each other, the higher the level of connectivity, and then the higher level of collaboration, because we've trained them in collaboration, we've trained them in communication styles, we've trained them in that methodology, and brought a mindset of, you know, connecting communication. What happens here is that there is a high level of trust across the board, and it's not just one little rowboat moving in the right direction, it's the whole organization moving at speed in that direction. High level collaboration definitely moves us in that direction, but we have to have connectivity first in order to have collaboration. So I think it's a really important lesson, and John establishes that greatly. So let's think about the benefits of connecting leadership. And again, I keep coming back to, if this is something that you think your organization needs, please come back to us here at Engage and Grow. Have a chat with us about how this can happen, because communication, or connective communication, that more empathic communication styles definitely leads to higher level of productivity, and definitely then leads to higher levels of growth. So connecting leaders today has to be different than it was 2-3 years ago. I think we're all aware of the fact that leadership and management has had to shift over the last 2 to 3 years. The viral virtual world that we lived in for that period changed things up of what people needed, wanted, and desired. So when we think of working from home, or that hybrid work model of working sometimes and sometimes, that strategy of building that into a workforce today, we're seeing that it is creating more connectivity. However, when it goes too far, so I'll take you back and give you an example from our businesses. What we saw in the beginning of the virtual workforce, and you know, we'd always been relatively virtual, I guess, from a management and leadership perspective, because we found great people all across the world, not just in one city. What we found was that if we'd already worked together for quite some time, being virtual was phenomenal, okay? Because we already had a connection, being virtual was great. Now, what we're challenging, or where it became very challenging, is when you brought in new people who didn't have any connection. They'd never really had any straight up collisions with people. They hadn't run into them in the hallway, or, you know, seen them as they were walking in from the parking lot and said hi and talked about things and that sort of thing, you know. So we've got to, as leadership team, make sure that we do create opportunities for connection. We're going to make that a part of it. And if it's a totally virtual workforce, then you've got to flip to virtual connectivity and methodologies for people to connect virtually. And this is why, again, we see a lot of big companies still bringing their people together for annual events, bringing them together for things, whether it be social or learning oriented or just growth oriented. It's important for us to look to that. And that's why one of the great things about what we do at Engage and Grow is we do these things live and in person. We do it that way so that we're forming connectivity amongst the humans. So important statistics, but important lesson from it as well. I do love this quote from Adam. I think that, you know, over the years, I went from the thinking of, your people are either your biggest pain or they're your greatest asset, to now where Adam's forced us to think of it in a different way, where we say, they're not our most valuable asset. They are our asset. The people are your business. They are your company. They're not the asset of the company. The people are the business. And so, on a logical basis, we see that play out when one company buys another company purely because they have great people working there, sort of thing. The people are the business today. And that's why I think it's important for us with this to get to that point of connected leadership, to get to that point of connected communication. So, oh, yes, I've just had a private message there. Yes, you can ask questions anytime. Please put them in the group chat. So that way everyone knows what questions are being asked. So please come up with your question and we will make sure we get to it as we move through. So let's think about this. If we want a high level of engagement, okay, we want a high level of engagement with our people, they have to, first of all, fit. Now, if we go back to even just a recruiting thought, okay, recruiting people, do they fit? Leading recruitment with your culture, leading recruitment with your agreed values, leading your recruitment with your vision, your mission, where you're going. In other words, who you are and why you do what you do, leading your recruitment with that allows for that fit level of the person, not fitness, but the fit. How well do they fit with the humans in the organization? How well do they fit with our culture? So it's very important in a recruiting scenario to lead with that. But it's also important in your training scenarios. That's why, again, sometimes a lot of training is dying because there's just not a level of engagement. And so we've got to bring back the engagement first and get them to buy in. So then if they find a fit with you, or you find the fit with them when they join your organization, then the belonging kicks in. Now, I want you to think back. Well, in business, when we look at it from a customer perspective, we talk about the customer feeling like they are a member and they belong. And it's that ladder of loyalty of customers. Well, if we can apply that loyalty ladder that applies to a customer in a business, to a team member in a business, it starts with the right fit. Are they the target audience? And are they the right type of person? And that's why your advertising, your recruiting, everything has to talk to the culture and the vision of the organization to do that. But once they're in, okay, now it's a matter of helping them learn that they belong, helping them establish a level or a feeling of belonging in the organization. And once they feel like they belong, which again is connectivity between humans, okay, getting to that emotional fit. Once they do, they become, okay, now I belong. Now I just become an integral part of the company. I'm not just learning the culture. I'm not just that. I become a guardian of the culture of the organization. And it's almost like there's a transference between I'm adding to the company and now the company is adding to me. We feel that very clearly when it becomes a part of you, when you start using the words we and you start describing the company as and the team there as your team, and it's just you integrate into that whole thing. So, oh, back one more. Sorry about that. I think we've touched on all of these. I want to touch a little more though on the subject of retention. Productivity from connected communication, engagement from productivity, retention. Trust comes from the four different areas we talked about there, although we can touch a little more on trust here as well. But when we think about that retention, if I feel like I fit, I feel like I belong, if I feel I'm integrated into the organization, then my retention level is far greater and far higher. And I ultimately today is not about pointing out the benefits of retention of a team member, but if you just think of the productivity benefits of retention, if you just think about the knowledge benefits of retention of a team member, it's very quick to look at it. But ultimately, that high level connected communication, that having that emotion connect with the task, having those things work together before we get to the ask or the request, really does lead us to a higher level of trust with our team. Now, taking that to the next thing, if we take a look at positive communication at work, what do I mean by positive communication? Well, years ago, someone once said to me, positive thinking isn't everything, but it's far better than negative thinking. Positive communication is not everything, but it's far better than negative communication, if that makes sense. And unfortunately, English language is my primary language. And unfortunately, it's often a double negative language with no worries, don't care. It goes to the double negative. The problem is the brain is like Google, okay? The brain doesn't think of the negative when you do a double negative. So, when you go to Google and you type in, don't think of a pink elephant, what do you get? Photographs of a pink elephant. It's that whole double negative doesn't actually warrant a positive in that scenario. So if we want effective communication, now the 7 C's, and maybe I'll redo this model into the 9 C's, because when you look at all the different versions of the 7 C's out there, there are multiple editions, and I've added 2 to the side here, but let's deal with each of them first. Courteous communication, not hard, easily to understand. Complete communication, did you give them all the information they needed? Coherent communication, does it connect and does it go together? Correct communication, are the facts you're using actually researched and correct? Concrete, did you give them something, the facts, the evidence, the details they needed? Concise, can we get rid of any fluff words in our communication? Clear, is it absolutely 100% obvious what I need to understand from this? And I added the 2 others there, the credible, which is really important for a connected communication, and creative. So I see these being thrown out there in the world of communication. And usually what I find when it comes to effective communication is that there'll be 2 or 3 of these. Someone who's experiencing non-effective communication, someone who's not getting the results they want from their communication, there'll usually be 2 or 3 of these where they're letting themselves down. It might be that they're not giving complete communication, okay? It might be that they're lacking courtesy in their communication, and therefore it's not being received very well because of the lack of courtesy. Or it might be that they leave out some details, or they estimate some details, or they make up some statistics type thing, and therefore the correctness gets in the way of them communicating effectively. But if doesn't matter which one, but you'll generally find people have 2 or 3. So think it through for yourself. Which ones of these are the ones where you're strongest, and which ones of these are the ones where you need a little more work? I know every time I look at this list, I sit there and go, okay, I got to make sure I work on that. You were never great at everything. We always got to work on 1 or 2 things. So one of the other things, and I mentioned it earlier, that a great leader's job is to help remove excuses, remove barriers. Well, what are some of the barriers that get in the way of effective communication? The biggest barrier that I see in most organizations is like the history, past thinking, past ways of relating to people. Oh, that person said something to me once that annoyed me, so I don't listen to them ever again type thing. But this whole group here of looking at what gets in the way of effective communication, I want you to just pick one of them for yourself to work on for the next month. What is the one area that you fall down in? Is it that you give people way too much information and therefore you overload them and overwhelm them, and therefore they can't take any more in? Is it because the way people relate to things, they have different meanings of them? Any way that you look at it, we've got to remove some of those barriers, especially if we're going to get to connect. All right. So let's just do a summary before we come to questions for the day. Okay. Any questions you've got, please feel free to type them in. especially if they're around connected communication. If they're around other engagement things, absolutely willing to take them. But if they're around the effective communication, that'd be great. I do have 2 questions already written down that came in prior to the event. So technology, let's think about it just for a second. If we want high-level collaboration, often technology is a great way to help us with that. You know, products like Slack allow us, Yammer allow us, Teams, Zoom, all of these pieces of technology do allow for a far greater level of collaboration out there. However, sometimes we let technology get in the way of humans being humans. We allow technology to override what it is that would create a connection level. You know, there's not much connection level created on an email, okay? If anything, it can often negate the level of connectivity type thing. You know, if we go back, and I'll just use a simple example of technology changing a connectivity indicator. If you think about when you used to send out birthday invitations, you'd send out a party invitation, you'd do that sort of thing, and you'd make it personalized, and it would be a nice invitation and that. And now people send a text message. Like there's a text message sent. It's like, we've missed a chance of connectivity there. And the same happens in business ever so often. You know, people are going into town and they go to your city and they don't even drop by, sort of thing. It's that connectivity that we could be looking for that sometimes, you know, and again, technology often helps with connectivity, but often it'll get in the way. So if we think about engagement and we think about connectivity in line with engagement, I always keep coming back to that. If we can build relationships, we can build engagement. And if we want to build relationships, we've got to build connectivity. There's no 2 ways about it. The more we get connective, whether it's a leader with their people, whether it's the people with each other, whether it's a teammate with a supplier, more connectivity leads to better relationships. As we get strength in our connections, relationships increase. Relationships increasing means that people work harder with each other, for each other, together. Thus, we get more engagement, more productivity, therefore more engagement, and therefore more growth. And that's why Engage and Grow still exists today, to make sure that happens. So when is the best time to start a connectivity program? Well, 5 years ago, if you want to be funny about it, you would say that, years ago was the best time to start a connectivity program. But in other words, now is the best time to start a connectivity program. Don't wait until your organization is at the precipice before you start getting people to build relationships and connectivity. Start building relationships and connectivity now. And if, I'm sure based on what I've taught you here today, you could take what we're looking at and you can go and apply it yourself. And that if that was the only solution, it would be a great solution. But what if there was a better way? What if there was a faster way? What if there was a way to partner with myself and the team at Engage and Grow? What if we could come in and give you the knowledge base that we have and help you draw out that level of engagement and help you increase the connectivity in your organization? Is that something that you think you'd want to examine? Absolutely. Please get back with the team member at Engage and Grow that brought you here today and discuss our programs and how we can help you with connectivity in your organization. And obviously, connectivity leads to relationships, relationships lead to productivity, productivity leads to engagement, engagement leads to growth. So really important aspects for all of us to consider. So before I take your direct questions, let me dive into the 2 questions that I've got here, and then I'll come back to your questions if you just start typing them in. If everyone online can think of at least one question, type it in, and well, we probably won't have time for that many, but at least the first 3 or 4 of you, get them in there and I'll get to those questions. Now, first question I got that was sent in prior to the webinar was, why is communications, why are the standards of communication changing? If I'm paraphrasing the question that came in from Portugal, why are the standards of communication changing? Well, I think people over time demand more of each other. They demand more. And if we use a simple example of the internet, do you remember when you used to go and stay in a hotel, and if they had a dial-up thing you could plug into? Now, some of you aren't even old enough to remember dial-up, but and then they had an Ethernet cable, and then they had Wi-Fi. And now your expectation is basically free Wi-Fi anywhere in the building. And if it doesn't work properly, what the heck? I don't even want to put in a password. And the same is true for communication. As we learn more and more about communication, as we get better and better at it, people are experiencing better communication, and they're not saying, oh, look, I experienced such great connective communication over here, but over here, I'm willing to put up with really bad communication. No, once they've experienced something great, people want to demand that in all areas of their life. So as you build connected communication, and as your people build connected communication, the demands won't slow down. They won't be, oh, got it, I've learned connected communication, fantastic, I'm done forever. No, I'm sure that in 3 or 5 years, I'll be back here teaching you the next layer of communication that needs to happen. Second question, again, paraphrasing the question, this one came in from here in North America. Why does employee engagement breed growth? Well, best way to answer that is actually go back and watch my webinar from last month on the 6 steps or the 6 stages of growth and how that happens. But the simple answer to you is this: engagement leads to productivity. Engagement reduces productivity killers. Engagement leads to a team doing more with less, a team doing more than they needed to because they've got the ability to do that. Yeah, I think that's probably the simplest answer, because productivity leads to growth. If we want to double a business, we can double the workforce or double the productivity of the existing people, either way. And of course, doubling productivity is far easier, far cheaper if we use the right program. Catherine, thanks for the question. How would you start to connect a team who work unconnected for years? Show them this webinar. There's the starting point of all of it. I think that's a very important thing. But if you have to, Catherine, sometimes you have to start with just basic communication training, basic communication understanding, to get them to a point where they're willing to leap into some form of connectivity. Chat with your Engage and Grow coach, have them go through with you the plan of what it is you want to achieve. If you say, okay, over the next 5 years, we want to achieve X, then sit down and design a program to achieve that. This level of connectivity, this level of engagement, this level of growth. If we know what your growth goal is, then we work backwards to what level of productivity and what level of engagement do you need to make that a reality. So yeah, I think working with the team is probably the fastest way, but watching this video or this webinar is a great starting point for everyone. Listen, we're out of time. We need to, as always, keep engaging our team. The more we engage them, the more they grow the business. As you build your people, they build the business. Keep that in mind. Keep building your people so they keep building the business. Now, by the way, that also comes with one condition. For your people to grow, you've got to grow. So check out our Leader of Leaders program. Anyway, take care. Bye for now. Look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Keep learning, keep engaging, keep growing.